Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, Joe Biden in Israel. The U.S. Vice President's two-day visit to the country was overshadowed by violence as he criticized Palestinian leadership. And we sit down with Chen Zhangliang of the China Association for Science and Technology. He has some interesting thoughts on how to boost the innovation among China's scientists. We begin today's show in Jerusalem, where violence continues to plague Israelis and Palestinians. U.S. Vice President Joe Biden's visit to Israel was overshadowed by the attacks. The peace talks between Israel and Palestine have continued over several decades, but all attempts have ultimately failed. What lies ahead for both sides as the violence continues, and what about the larger Middle East?
New attacks, fires, stabbings, funerals, endless clashes between Israel and Palestine. 2 Palestinians were killed by Israeli police in Jerusalem on Wednesday after apparently shooting at a bus, while a third was shot dead as he tried to stab soldiers in the occupied West Bank. This all happened during US Vice President Joe Biden's 5-day trip to the Middle East. At a news conference following talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Biden said there is no justification for the horrible violence.
There will be no justification for this hateful violence, and the United States stands firmly behind Israel's right to defend itself, as we are defending ourselves at this moment as well.
Biden said his wife and grandchildren were dining not far from the attack.
And I don't know exactly whether it was 100 meters or 1,000 meters, but and it just it brings home that it can happen. It can happen anywhere at any time.
President Abbas has not only refused to condemn these terrorist attacks, his Fatah party actually praised the murderer of this American citizen as a Palestinian martyr and a hero. Now this is wrong, and this failure to condemn terrorism should be condemned itself.
Since October, at least 29 Israelis have been killed in a wave of stabbings, shootings and car ramming attacks by Palestinians. More than 180 Palestinians have also been killed during this period. The search for a solution has been going on for decades, but all efforts have failed. Now the Palestinian side is trying to find international support to push forward the peace talks with Israel.
The current situation is particularly dangerous. The rise in violence keeps growing, with more colonization, the complete blocking of political negotiations. The international community must rally to bring Israelis and Palestinians to a peace dialogue.
That prospect at least adds somewhat to the hope of a peaceful solution, even as clashes continue in this war-torn region.
And for more on the long-lasting topic of peace in the Middle East between Israelis and the Palestinians, I'm joined in Boston by Professor Chuck Freilich. In Boston, he's a former Deputy National Security Advisor of Israel and now a senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. Welcome, Professor. In Ramallah, we have Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, who is the Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative and a member of the Palestinian Parliament. Welcome as well, Dr. Barghouti. Meanwhile, we also extend our welcome to our guest in Washington, D.C., Philip Crowley, a former United States Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs. Professor Crowley, also welcome. Well, the conflicts in the Middle East between the Palestinians and the Israelis are nothing new. Of course, the latest development could always attract media attention, but nobody's pinning much hope to the solutions. Should we? Now, Professor Freilich.
Well, first of all, what we need to see is for the Palestinians to finally put an end to terrorism. This has been going on for decades, and the Palestinians have grievances, and that's fine from their point of view, but there is absolutely no justification whatsoever under any circumstances for people taking knives and walking around and stabbing other people on the street. So that the balance, the equation that your reporter tried to create in the opening statement about Israelis being killed and Palestinians being killed, that's not a fair balance. The fact is, many Palestinian civilians are taking matters into their hands and simply trying to kill innocent civilians.
Okay.
That has to end.
Dr.
The other thing that has to end, and this is based on a fundamental misunderstanding among many people in the international community, the settlements are only one very small part of the problem. The real problem is that Israel on a number of occasions has put forward dramatic proposals for peace, and the Palestinians say no to everything.
Okay.
So they have to finally learn how to say yes to something, and then maybe we can go ahead.
We want to make sure that this is a conversation and a debate. It's not any one filibuster, not Professor Frillich, not anybody else also on this panel. So let me give you equal time, also Dr. Barghouti, but also equal time only, not overrun with your time, to state your stance. Sir, go ahead. Dr. Barghouti.
I don't think I overran the time you allotted me.
Well, let me say that, first of all, as a medical doctor, I would look always in the causes, not just the symptoms. Violence is a symptom of the disease. And the disease is the continuing Israeli occupation, illegal occupation of Palestinian land since 50 years. 50 years of occupation is the longest in modern history. And Israel is itself practicing state terrorism against Palestinians. During the last 5 months, of course, 30 Israelis were killed, and we don't like that. But on the other hand, Israel killed 190 Palestinians, 70% of whom were killed during peaceful demonstrations. When Palestinians demonstrate, they are killed, even when they demonstrate peacefully. That's why many young people turn to violence. In my opinion, the only way that leads to peace to both people is by Israel accepting to end occupation. Israel never accepted to end occupation, never accepted to stop the illegal settlement activities, which are illegal by international law.
Mr. Crowley.
Simply not true, sir.
Mr. Crowley, I really appreciate the other two guests observed their time. I hope the same with you as well. The U.S. has been actively participating on and off in the Middle East peace process between the Israelis and the Palestinians. You personally even were participating in some of those, for example, at the Rye River, at Camp David, and many years ago. What do you make of the latest stage? Do we have any solution, or should we just let the things go on, as there are internal politics in both states, and also there are conflicts between them? Mr. Crowley, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the irony here is that both sides, all sides, understand the broad parameters of what it will take, to reach a comprehensive peace agreement. We have just not been able to, politically get there over, the last couple of decades. In 2000, for example, at Camp David, it was a lack of regional support. Yasser Arafat was presented with a creative solution, but did not think he was going to have the support needed within the region, and that was very, very important. We've seen since then a lack of trust, and that's built up in the daily grind that we see tragically on the ground, in the West Bank. And we also have a complication since Camp David, which is that Hamas now governs Gaza, but is not a party to the peace process, but yet can become a spoiler in the peace process. And I would say finally, the Israeli security wall that was constructed several years ago has been very, very successful in improving Israel's security, but it has a byproduct in that today the Israeli population and the Palestinian population do not know each other as well as they did perhaps 1 or 2 decades ago, and that factors into this dynamic on both sides that neither feels the other is a partner for peace.
All right. May I just follow up by asking you, Mr. Crowley, how much do you think of importance is the peace process between the Israelis and the Palestinians for the current administration, the Obama administration, over the past 2 terms almost?
Well, the Obama administration tried in its first term, and it tried again in the second term. The first through my former boss, Hillary Clinton, the second through John Kerry. And the fact is that we could not overcome, the fundamental lack of trust that does exist between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas. They are not likely together, to march down a path to peace. And yet, the solution is actually known. The Clinton parameters that were put on the table in December of 2000 remain the fundamental pillars of a prospective solution. But I would say, and I'd be curious about my colleagues, that today, if Israel put forward the Clinton parameters, I wonder whether the Palestinians would accept them. And that just shows that tragically over the past 15 years, we've moved farther away from an agreement rather than closer to one.
You know, to the other two gentlemen, Professor from the Harvard University, Freilich, and also Dr. Barghouti, there has been, from all over the world, a huge fatigue about the peace process between the Israelis and the Palestinians. You both have already indicated very clearly in your opening statement about each other's stance that you do not think that can be changed at all. The question is, under that circumstances, is there anything of hope for peace? Peace comes with negotiations. Nobody moves, then no negotiation, then no result. So, could you be a realist with us now? Help us to understand, beside the political side, what exactly can be the starting point? Just as Mr. Crowley genuinely asked also, what about now? Where shall we start with? Or shall we start at all? Professor Freilich.
Look, what we have to do is get back to the negotiating table. Unfortunately, the Palestinians are refusing to do that, and they're trying once again to make an end run to the United Nations, and that's just a way of escaping the need to make concessions and to negotiate with Israel. And that's the only way to reach an agreement. But the more fundamental problem is, again, there is a misunderstanding as if this entire conflict is about occupation and settlements. The fact is that at Camp David, under the Clinton parameters, under the proposal by Prime Minister Olmert in 2008, Israel was willing to withdraw from virtually 100% of the territory, and that meant dismantling the vast majority of the settlements. The Palestinians seem to think that if they get less than 100% of their demands, it's unacceptable. Well, it just doesn't work that way in life. You have to be willing to actually compromise a bit and know how to say yes to something. Once that starts, then we can go forward, and both sides will have to make concessions.
Okay. Dr. Barghouti, do you buy the life coaching from Professor Freilich?
Well, let me say I'm very hopeful about the future, and I am hopeful because life has shown that occupation, which has transformed into a system of apartheid and racist discrimination, is not sustainable. What we see today in Palestine is a proof that it is not sustainable. The fact that there is boycott, divestment, sanctions all over the world against Israeli policies is a proof that it is not sustainable. The way to peace is simple. The world speaks about two-state solution. The Palestinian state cannot be established without Israel ending its occupation of Palestinian land. Palestinians have accepted a very painful compromise, which is to have a state in less than half of what the United Nations decided, in 22% of the land of historic Palestine. The question is Israel ready to withdraw from occupied territories? Or would it drag us into another 50 years of negotiations? Right. We've negotiated for 25 years. It's not going to work unless there is an international framework, and that's what we are calling for, an international peace conference with an international forum like was done with Iran. And we don't know why Israel is refusing that.
Well, Mr. Crowley, I wouldn't let you to provide the further solutions. I wouldn't like you to provide further solutions, but what I would like you to help us understand is some of the latest development with the Obama administration. Biggest news today is President Obama has accused some of U.S. closest allies in the Middle East, at least believed by some for certain time, Saudi Arabia. For Saudi Arabia to seek a way to coexist with some of the other players. What he used the word is arch enemy, Iran. And I just wonder, Mr. Crowley, with the U.S. seem to building a peace process with Iran, cut off some of the sanctions, and the change is going on in Iran. Meanwhile, the U.S. is reluctant, as President Obama said himself, to be drawn into some conflict, especially sectarian conflict in the Middle East. What do you think? Where do you think, especially, is the Israeli-Palestinian issue for the U.S.?
Well, I mean, my personal view is that we're not going to see progress until we see three leadership changes. A leadership change in Washington, a leadership change in Jerusalem, and a leadership change with the Palestinian Authority. The current dynamic does not lend itself, to a solution, and so I think we're going to have to see new leadership, new creativity, before we are able to make progress. I think the other interesting aspect is that 8 years ago, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was central to the dynamic in the Middle East. But today, 8 years later, the central conflict in the Middle East is Syria. It's not the Palestinian conflict. And so I can't tell you whether that provides an opportunity that in the absence of pressure, you can come back to the table, or whether we need to find a way to recreate a certain kind of political pressure that impels the parties to make the compromises that are necessary to reach an agreement.
Well, if you cannot tell me about that, let me ask the other two guests to see what's their assessment of the latest development. Dr. Barghouti, what do you think? With the world's attention away already, if you look at the headlines of the world, from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and everybody is already preoccupied with anti-terrorism and the Syrian issue, do you think the Palestinians will be able to locate down a so-called UN framework as you have just claimed? Is it better to take a deal now rather than later?
No, we would have preferred to have a deal 20 years ago, and that was meant to happen after Oslo Agreement. But unfortunately, the Israelis not only did not implement the agreement, but also they destroyed what was implemented of it. In my opinion, regardless of the fact that the attention is away from the Palestinian-Israeli issue today, it remains as the core problem in the region. If you can call it a conflict, and I don't think it should be called a conflict, it is the mother of all conflicts. Nobody can get away without dealing with the Palestinian-Israeli issue. And in my opinion, the process that is happening today, okay, governments are busy with other things, but at the public level, the phenomena that is happening, and I'm sure the Israelis are finding it difficult to accept, is that the peoples of the world, including the peoples of Western governments like Germany and France, are moving towards supporting the right of the Palestinians for independence and freedom and recognition of Palestine, as they did recognize Israel. So in my opinion, at popular level, there is a shift, and it will increase. The boycott, divestment, sanction campaign is only one example of that. And I hope that this pressure will eventually lead to real peace for the sake of both people.
Okay, Professor Freilich, your response, your assessment.
Look, everyone recognizes that there's only going to be peace when there's a Palestinian state, and that's why Israel is in favor of a two-state solution. And I personally don't think that there is anything more important, both for Israelis and Palestinians. The problem, as I said before, is that the Palestinians keep saying no to everything. Now, to be frank, at the moment, as Mr. Crowley was saying, I couldn't agree more, until we get a leadership change in all three capitals, it's not going to happen. That's an unfortunate reality. We're going to have to wait a certain period. There'll be a new American president in January. There will be elections again in Israel sometime in the next, at most, 3 years. And the Palestinians are now entering a period of succession, and we don't know who, we don't know when, but we don't know who will succeed Mr. Abbas. Maybe it'll be a number of people. We don't know how that's going to affect the Palestinians' ability to negotiate.
All right.
I hope that sometime in the not-too-distant future that we can get back to the table, and that's going to require sitting together, not trying to escape to international forums, and making hard concessions on both sides.
Okay, great. Mr. Crowley, you talk about leadership change. It is realistic when you talk about that, but at the same time, it could also be suspicion. Are we just trying to create excuses for us for not act now? Have we tried enough? Especially Washington. After all, it is still one of the most important brokers in a way, on this issue?
Look, the fact that we have not succeeded is not because of a lack of effort on all sides. We have been at this very intensively, for 20 years. At the end of the day, it's a lack of political will. It is the fact that neither the Israelis nor the Palestinians have prepared their populations for less than 100% of what they're arguing for. That is this is not a substantive problem. It is a political problem, and I think the United States bears some responsibility for this. For example, there's not a rapport between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Obama, and that does limit what how Israelis feel about the prospect of being pushed to make difficult concessions. So I do think, and I agree with Professor Freilich, that we're just going to have to wait to see leadership changes on all sides, a different perspective, and we'll come back to this, but it will probably take 1 or 2 or 3 years before we're there.
Before we go, we want only one sentence from any of the other two guests. One sentence. What do you think Vice President Joe Biden can do this time? Just one sentence if you can, Professor Freilich.
Not very much.
All right. Dr. Bakuti.
Nothing, but I want to add one line, which is that maybe the speakers today at your program can afford to wait 2 or 3 years, but we can't.
Okay.
Every day that passes is costing us life and suffering.
Everybody has their right to say one sentence, and everybody share the same timeline. Thank you so much for being with us and also being very supportive and also expressing your insights from your own perspective. Professor Chuck Freilich, Dr. Mustafa Bakuti, and Mr. Philip Crowley, really appreciate it, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. Stay with us here on World Insight. We got our final segment coming right up.
10%.
Join us for a chat with Chen Zhangliang of China Association for Science and Technology. He has some interesting thoughts on how to boost innovation among China's scientists. You're watching World Insight on CCTV News. The label Made in China may someday be replaced by Innovated in China. In recent years, some remarkable innovation has come out of China to be highlighted worldwide. The latest government work report also says that the country will continue to build first-class national science centers and technological innovation hubs. But some difficulties do lie ahead, and experts say a new way of thinking is needed.
Fruitful development. In the past few years, we have seen significant growth in China's technological innovation capability. Major achievements have been marked. China received its first Nobel Prize in Medicine last October, awarded to the 84-year-old scientist Tu Youyou for discovering artemisinin. Tianhe-2, a supercomputer developed by China, has defended its position as the world's #1 system in the latest top 500 list of the world's most powerful supercomputers. And the release of China's C919 plane was cheered by many in the country. Made in China finally has a new meaning. In a press conference, China's Minister of Science and Technology said that new measures will be carried out in line with the 13th five-year plan in the future.
First, led by key projects in Science and Technology Innovation 2030 to cultivate continuing innovation capability. Second, to form a low-cost, high-efficiency service network for innovation and entrepreneurship. Third, to set up, modernize the industrial and technology system. Fourth, deepening reform to elevate innovation capabilities.
However, one admitted that there are hurdles ahead. China's science sector suffers from a lack of originality and innovation. This is in part due to restrictive policies that do not promote innovation and some outdated institutional mechanisms. But the new measures demonstrate a desire for true reform. Is a new era beginning for China's technology sector?
Well, even as we cheer on China's scientific achievements in the year 2015, we can't help but ask, how should we facilitate more creativity in science and technology? When will China make its name as a source of innovation? Probably when children begin to dream of being scientists rather than celebrities. For more answers, I spoke to Chen Zhangliang, who is a bioscientist and now vice chairman of the China Association for Science and Technology. First, we talk about his childhood idol, a mathematician, Chen Zhangliang.
It seems to me like the things happened in 1987. Well, at that time, I was really excited with a report written by Xu Ci. I still remember the name of the book called Goldberg Conjecture. And that really bring me into science area.
It was about a Chinese mathematician.
Yeah, Chen Zhangliang.
Chen Zhangliang.
My hometown person
Oh,
from
is that?
Fujian province,
That's
and
right.
we are in the same town. And he was so smart enough to solve the problem, very difficult mathematics problem, and that fascinated me a lot. And I really entered science area because of his influence. And today I can feel the environment in China. Science like that time, people very enthusiastic in innovation. So science became very popular today. I love the environment because this is really a kind of hopeful to our country in the future.
I understand there are already 13,000, something like startups being built every day in China?
Yes, I checked our premier reports. There is over 12,000 new companies built each day in China. We are talking about 12,000. So I can feel many young people, and it's sometimes the technology very simple. I don't feel like that technology could make money, but they are happy to make money. You know, they just get together. I found one company which is about like 10 undergraduate students. They get together and to just do one small tiny business. You know what business?
What did it do?
They ask universities in Beijing and Shanghai, whatever, our country university, and they found about 20 students in each university, and then announce in the country to every high school kids, if you want to talk to any students in any universities, you have a right to talk to them.
So they find a niche and they build their own company.
Yeah, the kind of networking company, it's very easy. However, you know what happened? What happened was they found that over 10,000 students every day started to communicate with each other. So the network built.
Innovation. It's been a major component of Premier Li Keqiang's government report at the annual National People's Congress. He stressed that we should strive to achieve major breakthroughs in basic research, applied research, and research in strategic and frontier fields by 2020.
China's investment in research and development is expected to reach 2.5% of GDP, and the contribution of scientific and technological advances towards economic growth should come to 60%. Fulfilling these objectives will turn China into an innovative and talent-rich country.
But improving the efficiency of R&D remains a challenge. China is facing a situation where 77% of its 1.4 trillion yuan's worth of R&D investment comes from the private sector instead of universities and institutes. That's mainly because the approval processes are too long, experts say. By the time new technology hits the market, demand has often already changed. So implementing major reforms may be a major task in the future.
One part in society, so many young people get into a new business. Another part, the researchers in university, in research institute, in academy, somehow not that excited.
Why? Why is that, do you think?
So we have a study on that, and we found a couple of things. Number one, the evaluation system for researchers, for scientists in China. The professor in university, if you're a young professor, you have a research project, you have funding, good, you found a gene, Then you got excited. You know that the gene related to diabetes, the gene related to cancer disease, the gene related to high yield in rice or wheat or corn. So you got a new discovery. Now in China, most important things for researcher, quickly kick a paper out to publish paper. And then paper you have to publish in the best journal in the world. Then you got a chance to promote it to associate professor in Beida or Tsinghua, any university. Now when you are associate professor, you got more funding, you got more student, you push real hard to kick another paper, good paper out. So
paper
you need a
after
paper.
It's a
you
paper
got a papers, good. Now you got a professor. Now then, what to do? Still need to work hard to have a big discovery. Then have a good paper. Then you got a paper published in our area, published in Science or in Nature. They're the two best journal.
Right.
Then you got a good chance to be academician. In the evaluation system, you don't tell professor, in case you have a good gene, that gene, if you can make into drugs later, it produces the protein. Then the protein could cure diabetes or cure cancer disease. Then we come you, still a good contribution, that you can be a professor. Unfortunately, in our system, we don't have that evaluation. We need to change it, somehow to change this society. Because that system, and so many young junior scientists push very hard in science, in research, somehow lack the brain to get into to go into development. This is we found that problem one. Problem two, that we don't have the budget, we don't have money to go into development. We have money in R, research, R&D, but very limited funding in development. However, the good thing is Premier Li Keqiang announced in this meeting, say that he's going to increase R&D budget to 2.5% by year 2020.
2.5% of GDP.
2.5% of total GDP by year 2020. This is good news.
But it's not just the role of the government in terms of increasing the budget for scientific research. It's also about how to innovate, how to motivate the public to participate, the business community.
You are absolutely right. So one, I say, is government investment, not enough. Second is somehow that the country did not build in a system to encourage the private sector to put the money in. Today we have 2.09% of GDP. I found that so much different we discovered after research, so much different 10 years ago and this year. 10 years ago, our R&D budget no more than 1.2%, 1.5%. But today, why suddenly we found it's 2.09%? That's because in past 10 years, somehow government pay attention to the private company to invest in R&D. But what the research results show that it's not enough. Country need to encourage more companies to put the money in, especially state-owned enterprises. Number one, number two, and number three, the one that is how to make sure that the inventor, that the scientist, their benefit. You have your discovery. So you say that you can move into the industrial, move into company. You can spin off. So doing the development work, nice. However, our system, somehow the government have a regulation. So for IP, you can put into the company. Before, the year ago, you are not allowed to get over 10% of company shares.
But the question is, we know these problems.
Well, it's changing now.
Are these problems likely to change in the short term?
I know that government finally decided to announce a new regulation for R&D, allowing scientists to own over 50% of company shares. Depends your negotiation, and that's good. That's very good. So in the last months, the announcement by government how to encourage scientists spin off your technology. They have a 6th regulation, beautiful regulation. So I feel in the future it will have a big changes in R&D area.
But you know, even with all of these conditions that you have said met, there's still the issue of IPR protection, for example,
right.
Whether intellectual property rights are going to be genuinely respected.
Somehow, historically, we did not pay that much attention to IPR. So as a researchers, if you discover a gene, a protein could be used as a drug. Anytime you spend so much amount of money and time to do it, and then somehow in the market you will quickly find the copy
right.
of the products in the market.
So what can we do?
And so only thing is we are hoping the government can pay more attention to IPR.
There are a lot of different areas of basic research, but many wonder where are the areas that China should focus attention on?
I would say that after such a big investment by the government in the R&D and also society's investment, my feeling is that in next 10 or 20 years, it's a golden age for Chinese science and development. Today we have overcapacity of some industrial products. We all know that. Meanwhile, we know that something is not enough. So we know that many high technology products we're still importing.
Like what?
So we import chips. But meanwhile, not only the chips, do you know that like a engine? We always we're talking about like a airplane, like a jet. We have 919 jet. But remember the engine. Still we need to import engine. GE's engine or whatever the country engine, automobile engine, airplane engine, jet airplane engine. So it's high-tech products, right? So I can feel in the future in China, in high technology area, we have a big breakthrough. One that is biotechnology. Biotechnology, one in agriculture biotechnology, like a GM, genetically modified organism, or like a molecular based on breeding. We have a new variety
right.
against insects, against drought, against cold, against salt, and with a good quality, better quality. That biotechnology in agriculture. Then we have good biotechnology in pharmaceutical. More drugs will show up, including drugs against different cancer diseases, against vascular diseases, against diabetes, against many virus infection. I can feel many new drugs will show up in our country. So biotechnology. Second would be information technology, like 3G, 4G, 5G. Those internet and communication will be big breakthrough. Now, in information technology, one work that China is in very advanced level. That's quantum communication.
I see.
I would say that quantum communication, China will lead the world in some area. So the second technology called information technology. Number 3 technology I can see is new material technology. And this show it will have a big impact in the world. And China will follow up quickly. One new material called graphene. The graphene is kind of like a magic material. It can do so much things. It's just still scientific in obtaining the graphene, the good graphene. But if we have the big breakthrough in the graphene, it will change many things in industrial. So new material and nanometer technology, nanotech, those materials obviously is important. Number 4, it will be should be a new energy. New energy. Today we have solar energy. We have wind energy. We have maybe we have more new energy, safe energy, clean energy. It certainly will be the future in China. Then in a space technology, space station, landing the moon, possible in Mars. They're all possible.
Professor Chen, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All the best. That's Chen Zhangliang, Vice Chairman of the China Association for Science and Technology, talking about the scientific research China is likely to focus on and the possible prospect. Many people are asking when China will enter again a spring of science. Well, that's a big question mark. We'll have to wait and see. And it's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You'll be able to find us, or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.